Where do we begin? Well, the AC compressor failed again. Yesterday, actually, I was driving and enjoying the AC in the upper 90s, and all of a sudden it started getting warmer and warmer. So today we're going to look at that, and also I wanted to show you how I recharge the AC myself for like 25 bucks, how not to do it, how I've messed up in the past. And we're going to revisit something that I really didn't want to show again, but I didn't really show it very thoroughly the last time, so I guess I get to redo that and show you guys really what goes into changing valve stem seals. So again, the procedure isn't very difficult on these engines. You just need a few special tools. I wouldn't even call them special. One of them is just a compression tester. Take out this is a valve stem core removal tool. I just take out the valve stem from the hose on the compression tester, and this end obviously goes into the cylinder. You take the spark plugs out, which I've already done here, and then that goes to your air compressor. So I put like 80 or 90 psi in there to keep the valves from falling down, and there's all the rockers removed. And you might recognize that valve spring compressor that I modified previously, showed that. And the AC line, which I had mentioned, I wasn't real happy about the clearance on the alternator. I'm going to work on that today too. So this is what we're going to look at today. Also, the issue with my truck currently is that it has the wrong gears again. Surprise. The gears are just too short this time, so what's happening is I'm running out of gear before I hit the trap. So I thought about putting a 373 in it, which is what I should have done. Should have kept it in the beginning, but I didn't. But instead, I'm gonna try to get the valves to not float another way, and hopefully it doesn't cost much money. So obviously I'm running the stock cam, and the stock cam isn't very aggressive, so you shouldn't need a whole lot of spring pressure to keep it from floating. Now I'm noticing on the 302 with the GT40P heads, I had valve float somewhere around 5,600, 5,500. On this setup, I only gained about 200 RPM. And what I'm gonna do is, well, first of all, let me show you what's going on here. So you've seen the components, so you probably know what we're gonna see here. Unfortunately, this cylinder head over here has the exact same issue as before, where every single valve stem seal is pushed up and no longer held down. Now you might think, wait a minute, I thought it smoked a lot when that happened, and we're not going to get into that, but you would be right. The valve stem seals are really a light smoking problem. So what I've noticed now is that if it idles for a long time and I floor it or just rev it up aggressively, it will put out a puff of blue smoke, but just once until you idle it again. So the overwhelming smoke that you were seeing before, that was a different issue. We'll get into that later, but for now, I want to show you how I'm going to get this thing to hopefully rev higher and also fix the smoking. Alright, so before I remove the springs, we're getting started with installed spring height. Now, this is something that I don't normally mess with, but before I take the springs off, I might as well see where we're at. So this is the exhaust valve, that's the intake valve, and this is the cylinder, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. I can't measure all of them this way, and if you know me, you know that I don't buy the special tools. When we did preload, I used just this guy, and so that's what we're going to use again. I'll show you how to measure installed spring height using just this, and this feature right here is what makes it possible. So all you do is you extend this tip out until it contacts So now we're looking at the installed spring height, and in this case just so happens to be 1.85. So that's the intake valve on cylinder number 5. 1.85, cylinder 5. There we are. So this might not be exact, but it should get you close enough to know where you're at. You're supposed to have a 60 thousandths allowance for coil bind from your maximum lift versus your minimum spring compressed height. So you want 60 thousandths between your coils to eliminate the coil bind threat. And also, these heads called for 1.80. There's a 20 thousandths allowance between each one, which these ones that I could get to anyways seem to fall in line there. But I think what we'll do is shift this down, try to go like a tenth. So 1.73, 1.75, 1.73, 1.74. Just keep everything the same, but add a tenth to each spring to preload it. Since I don't have a lot of lift, it should give me the 60 thousandths I need still, and give a little more spring pressure to hopefully it's not float anymore. All right, hopefully this makes this AC line clear a little better. We're adding about 3.5 inches of straight, and it's about 60 amps. Halfway there, got this weld finished. And this one I gotta kind of be careful with because this hose is rubber, so I can only tackle a little at a time. So this one, I tip the hose up that way so that the heat kind of goes that direction away from this rubber hose, hopefully. So yesterday I got quite a bit of things done. 2 things to mention. One, I got half of the valve stem seals pushed back down. I didn't replace them this time. I did what I wanted to do the first time, which is use silicone. So I just put a little silicone around the seal, a little silicone around the guide, pressed it back down. But more importantly, to help with the valve float, what I ended up doing was going to the hardware store and getting some 1/2 inch washers that measure out about 90 thousandths thick. And the purpose of them is to go underneath the spring seat on the bottom and push the spring up. So that raises the installed height, which adds about 30 pounds of force across the board. So here's a look at those seals, the ones that I keep having troubles with. Like I said, I replaced the driver's side, and the driver's side, every seal was pushed up. On the passenger side, it was only the exhaust. So again, siliconing them down just a little bit on that inside, and then a little bit on the guide that it sits on. Push them together. Hopefully that helps out. The valve spring tool needed a little upgrade. This thing actually broke in the middle of the job yesterday, and what happened was this whole piece folded down like this, bent sideways. It started falling off the spring, and so I added this little extra back piece there to hold it together. So let's see if you can see that a little closer. Just welded this plate there, and that just keeps these arms from bending out. Of course, I had to straighten it back out first. So we'll see if that thing helps out. Hopefully it doesn't break again. And after I get the rest of the valve stem seals pushed down and the valve springs back on, we're going to be recharging the AC. So that's the project for today. All right, so we're charging the AC, running about 100 psi to this pump, which is hooked up to the low side right here. It's getting dark, so I'm not going to show you the whole process, but I do want to show you what I use to do this. So basically anybody can recharge their AC for under 50 bucks if you're not starting with anything. You do have to have an air compressor if you want to use a vacuum operated pump. They are the electric models, which may be a little more expensive. I got this vacuum operated unit for like 15 bucks and it works pretty well. I've used it quite a bit. I have had problems with this fitting assembly leaking, but that's just a low side fill hose hooked to that. So you hook that up to the accumulator, and then I use this reusable charge hose with a trigger. Now, I did notice that these cans come in two different flavors. One of them's got the rubber seal with a pin, like this. And there's another style, actually, this is an adapter that I had to buy for the newer style. And the older style uses a different can, so they don't interchange. And I looked around forever thinking I needed a different fill hose when actually all I needed was this adapter. So this hose here will work with either style refrigerant. So in my truck, it calls for 1.5 pounds of R134a and I believe around 8 ounces of PAG 46 oil. So this is the oil here, and what I like to do is pour a little bit into the compressor, maybe 1/2 ounce or 1 ounce or so. This is basically 1.5 charges, and you can see I don't have a whole lot left. So I'm not going to show the whole process, but all you do is pull a vacuum on it. I pulled a vacuum for about an hour, and I've got these 2 cans. I'm going to add both of them. I added an additional 2 ounces of oil. Originally there was 4 ounces. The compressor seal failed. I didn't see any oil come out, but for good measure, since I'm replacing the compressor, I added a couple more ounces. And here's a little trick. Use rubber bands to hold this nozzle so that it's filling it while it's idling, so you don't have to stand here. This takes a really long time. The heat from the intake manifold also helps it. But you can see I've got the compressor running. You can see it turn off. Now it's running. This part's getting pretty hot, the discharge. Pretty cool over here, I mean, relatively speaking. Fan's running full time. I had to upgrade that wiring right there. So this is for the fan. This is for the daytime running lights and the fuel pump. You can see where I fixed this AC line. Before it was right over the top right here, and it actually had been melting that plug, so now it goes around the front. I added like 3 inches right here, right there. Alright, it's starting to get a little cooler in here. Just running AC. And I've rewired this switch. It used to be a 2-step, now it's a fan off, fan on, so it's an override. I'm hoping that helps with the charge temps when I go to run it at the track again next time. Yeah, these vents are getting cooler. Right now, you can see the compressor clutch is engaged, the compressor is spinning. Now it's off. So you point it to the temperature outside, that's the needle in the middle. So it's dropping, dropping. The compressor's running again now. Now it's off. You can see it slowly creep up. And when it turns on, you'll see the pressure drop. There you go. Now the compressor's running. So it drops down to where it says it's supposed to, and then it goes up. Stays in the green about halfway. This is with 24 ounces of refrigerant. Once it hits about 40, it kicks on, drops down to 25 psi, 20, about 20 psi. So it drops from 40 to 20 psi at 62 degrees with 2 cans, R134a, 12 ounces per can.